First Vice Chair Messier. Present. Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Present.
Representative Casey. Representative Cardillo. Representative Corvasi. Representative Edwards.
Present.
Representative Falella.
Present.
Representative Hawkins. Representative Henrys.
Present.
Representative Kazarian.
Present.
Representative McEntee. Representative McNamara.
Present.
Representative Morgan.
Present.
And Representative Newberry.
Here.
Chairwoman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, James. Greatly appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, to our late night session hearing. So this will certainly be one for the record books. At this time, I will entertain a motion to hold tonight's calendar of bills, 5475, 5722, 5723, 5856, 5938, 5939, 6010, 6011, 6012, 6089, and 6091. Entertain it to be held for further study, please.
Chairwoman, I make a motion?
Motion made by Whip Kazarian. Do I get a second?
Second.
Second by Representative McNamara and Representative Henrys. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Williams.
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Yes.
Representative Cardillo. Representative Casey. Representative Corvasi. Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Falella.
Yes.
Representative Hawkins. Representative Henrys.
Yes.
Representative Kazarian.
Yes.
Representative McEntee. Representative McNamara.
Yes.
Representative Morgan.
Yes.
And Representative Newberry.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative, 0 opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you. The first thing on tonight's calendar is House Bill 5475 by none other than moi in all purple for recognition of the great work that women are always doing. Every day, that is, not just the month. So, this act would help expedite the payments made to subcontractors for work they perform on state contracts. It would also establish a new process to help minority business enterprises collect for their work on state contracts from their prime contractors. This act will further require that contractors certify and, if requested, provide evidence that all subcontractors have been paid for previous subcontracting work prior to the award of a state contract. This legislation is strictly about getting our hard-working subcontractors on the state project paid for their work as fast as possible. These are often small businesses, and to have their payment quickly means to the world to their employees and the business operation. With that being said, it's been a trend of a way of doing business in the state of Rhode Island by those big privileged companies, entities, individuals that get the hookup from the floor up. Always to take advantage of the little guys. So with that, my statement, my testimony, I will move on to the callers. The first one on here is Anita Bruno from the Rhode Island Women's in the Trade. Miss Bruno? Hello?
Hello.
Good evening. You're
Good
on.
evening.
You're on, and just so that you're aware, we are hoping that you make all the points necessary to this bill and be very conscious that we're just getting started and we have a very long agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I am in support of Bill 5475, prompt payment. Being a union carpenter for 15 years, I have bore witness to small subcontracting companies, mom and pop companies going out of business because the contractor decided to withhold their payment. I think that this bill would be very beneficial to the survival of small businesses, small mom and pop general contractors, subcontractors that may not have the capital to withstand a payment being withheld. Please support this bill 5475. Allow prompt payments to be scheduled into everything. Allow prompt payments to be put forward so that these companies have a chance to not only survive but thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Bruno. Have a good evening. Mr. Gregory Mancini is the next.
Hello, Madam Chairwoman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. I commend you for sponsoring this very important piece of legislation. As the last speaker said, we've witnessed people who are good business people, and they've gone out of business because upper tier contractors have withheld funds, and it's very challenging for the small business person to work in this industry and be successful, and it's particularly difficult for for minority and women-owned businesses to be successful. So we also think that this piece of legislation supports the Governor's Diversity in Construction Working Group, and for these reasons, we support the bill. I submitted some written testimony. I would just recommend that the slight modification to require payment from 5 days as proposed in the bill to 7 days as a small modification to the bill. So that is all, and if anyone has questions, I'm more than happy to take your questions.
Are there any questions from any members of the committee? I have one, Mr. Mancini. 5 days to 7 days, are we talking are we talking 7 work days or just 7 calendar days?
Well, for me, it's 7 calendar days. And as I told you the other day, some other people may feel differently, but I have no problem with 7 calendar days. Okay?
If the change is 7 calendar days, I would be comfortable. I don't have a problem changing it to that, providing that they'll be aware that if there is some sort of holiday when that payment is due, that they're not going to utilize that day as an excuse not to get payment, but rather they would utilize it consciously and say, we will pay them before then. So I accept the suggestion, and I will work on it and look at it wholeheartedly. And if anyone else has any other suggestions, I'm open to them. So you know, and I greatly appreciate it.
No problem, and I think it's a great piece of legislation, and I commend you for taking initiative to put it in.
Now, as I made mention, that was your punishment for waiting so long to make contact. So I am saying to you, because you gave such a nice testimony, I will allow you to speak on the other bill that you have before me, and that way you can go and watch a football game or something on TV.
Sure, I'm more than happy. That's very nice of you. I'm more than happy to do that. My organization also submitted letters of support for H5722, an act relating to public works. This is a piece of legislation, comprehensive piece of legislation that would require or would utilize or require apprenticeship training program contractors to be as a requirement, you have to have an apprenticeship program to work on school construction projects over $5 million. This is a bill that passed the Senate last year, was actually in the governor's budget before COVID last year also. And, you know, we just have a significant skills challenge in our industry. And so we think cultivating new workers through apprenticeship training will help alleviate such a potential skills shortage. It also will ensure good quality work on these projects. In industry surveys we find that 90% of the contractors using apprenticeship programs report that they would recommend them due to the immense benefits and training of these programs. So for that reason, we support 5722. Like I said, it passed the Senate the last couple of years and was in the governor's budget, initial budget last year. So if anyone has any questions on that, I'm more than happy to answer them. But again, we submitted written testimony on that.
Are there any questions to the witness? Hearing none, I thank you very much, Mr. Mancini.
I have one other bill, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I have one other bill.
Proceed.
And that is, thank you.
Could you hold just 1 second? I would like the record to reflect that Representative Casey is here present. And Ms. Representative Casey, would you like the record to reflect the following? You could speak about
Yes,
vote.
I would like to be included in the attendance as well as the vote to hold the bills for further study.
Thank you. Proceed, Mr. Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman, sorry. So the last bill is the 8th bill on your agenda, and that is H6011, an act relating to labor relations. This is a very specific bill to the union construction industry. It proposes to modify the Healthy and Safe Families Workplace Act that was passed several years ago to allow signatory contractors to actually have a separate fund administered by a third-party federally regulated ERISA fund to administer the sick time. What happens in our industry is workers go from job to job and employer to employer over the course of a year, on many occasions. So therefore, these workers are not really able to enjoy the full benefits of the Act, and despite the fact that they've accumulated enough hours. So through the third-party trust fund that multi-employers utilize, they will be able to get credit for the hours worked under the Act, so they can get the benefits of the Act when they work for more than one employer. It is something that's unique to construction. It's something that's unique to the construction industry. And the most important thing is this proposed change is permissive, meaning it's not a mandate. So this is something that would have to be negotiated through the collective bargaining process.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Mancini. There are no questions for you. Further questions?
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the committee's time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Next, we have Mr. Michael Sabatoni.
Enough hours. So through the third-party trust fund.
Michael, could you please turn your volume down, please?
Sure. Credit for the hours worked. The Act, so they can get the benefits of the Act when they work for more than one employee.
Mr. Sabatoni?
Yes.
Could you please lower your volume of your electronic device. You could,
I just turned it off. Is that better?
much better, thank you. You can proceed, please.
Oh, I am live. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I absolutely love the purple dress and the glasses and the beads, the whole ensemble. I think it looks fabulous.
Thank you, thank you.
So I will proceed on the Prompt Payment Act. Someone who's been working on the prompt payment, especially trying to work with the minority business community and the disadvantaged business community, this is one of the things that we felt was imperative for the success of minority and disadvantaged businesses, as well as little small contractors, as you had mentioned in your description. We've been a supporter of this, the building trades, since we've started this endeavor. I commend you for putting it forward. The unionized construction industry is behind this 100%. The building trades are behind it 100%. Again, with that tweak that Gregory had mentioned just before me from 5 to 7 days, and we'd love to see this passed. And as long as the work can be certified and verified, there should be no reason why small businesses that are paying the payroll on a weekly basis should have that access to the capital once they perform the service. So I wholeheartedly support that and hope that the rest of the General Assembly will as well.
So that means that you will be front line and center advocating for this bill to be passed, right?
I have been for the last 10 years, that and some other improvements through the Department of Administration, as well as other quasi-agencies, and I will be front and center and am front and center.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions to Mr. Sabatoni?
Madam Chair, I have a question if I could.
Please proceed, Representative Newberry.
Thank you. Mr. Sabatoni, I haven't had a chance to compare, but do you know how similar this proposed bill is to the equivalent statute in Massachusetts?
I do not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, I mentioned it because I think the Massachusetts statute's a good one. So if to the extent it matches that, I'll definitely would support it. But I don't know how they came about. So just curious.
Well, I would think somewhere along the line we always check Massachusetts when we're looking, and it's probably been a ways back, but I imagine it's close but similar. But exactly, I do not, Rep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like the record to reflect that Representative Corvasi is here. You can present your request.
Madam Chair, if I could be recorded in my attendance and also in the affirmative, I assume you held the bills for further study?
Yes,
I'd like to be in the affirmative, Madam Chair. Thank you.
so moved. Any other questions to Mr. Sabatoni? Hearing none, you also have signed up for a couple others. If you wish, please proceed on those.
I appreciate that courtesy. I will proceed to House Bill 5722, which is an act related to public property and public works. This is a bill that we've also been supporting for, I don't know, maybe a decade or so. That's called the Apprenticeship Utilization Bill, I will call it. And what it does is it allows for the employment of apprenticeships and actually creates a need for apprentices and a pipeline for young men and women into the construction industry by the state of Rhode Island on public works projects. And as the state is one of the largest purchaser of construction services in the state of Rhode Island, and we're on the cusp of a lot of school construction, creating this need will help create and keep a pipeline of young men and women looking to enter the construction industry via registered apprenticeship programs so that they can become proficient in these classifications and enjoy a career, a good paying career in the construction industry. So we wholeheartedly support this. For those of you that have known me to be up the State House, I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, we're dealing with the pandemic. This has been a bill that we've been supportive of for at least as long as I've been around, 10 years or so. It's good, sound public policy, and we would wish that the General Assembly and the House take a good look at this. As we embark on the school and the road programs that we've got going on, we're going to need more young tradesmen and women than ever before, and this absolutely makes sure that there are opportunities as the state, again, is one of the largest purchaser of construction services in Rhode Island in the marketplace, provides that need. So I would appreciate the support on this bill as well.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sabatoni? Hearing none, I thank you. on that one. Is another one?
And then the last bill, Madam Chair, is House Bill 6011. So this bill is a unique bill. It only affects the unionized construction industry. It only affects the collectively bargained multi-employer industry in the construction industry, which is the unionized construction industry, because of the uniqueness of it. The National Labor Relations Act actually carves out construction workers and gives them a distinction of 8F employees as opposed to 9A employees, meaning contractors can actually decide if they want to be a union employer as opposed to, and you still have the ability to vote, but there's a very unique circumstance in the multi-employer world where all the employers pool their bargaining rights. And the SIP bill had created some issues for us just due to the fact of how we're structured. We run on referral lists, which we call hiring halls. We dispatch workers to multiple employers, to multiple projects at any given time. And this would be enabling legislation that would allow the trade unions to then negotiate with the multi-employer associations if they wish to provide the sick and safe benefit through their health and welfare plans, through their registered ERISA funds that are registered with the United States Department of Labor. Every other benefit that the unionized construction industry provides for the tradesmen and women that they are provided is administered by these funds. This is the only benefit that has come up recently that is kind of like an outlier. And because of the difficulties to try and track and try and maintain the numbers with the system that we have, it's been an absolute headache. This would allow for us to administer, in addition to our pensions, our annuities, our legal service, our health and welfare funds, to add the ability, if negotiated, again, it's an enabling legislation, the ability for a trade union who negotiates with a trade association on a multi-employer scenario to meet the minimum standard of this act and a per-hour benefit for our members. And this would be a real opportunity for us to actually provide a benefit without the headaches we've had to try and comply with it. The intent of the act was great, but it didn't take into consideration the uniqueness of the multi-employer collectively bargained construction industry in Rhode Island. So it only affects the 10,000 or so union tradesmen and women that we represent and the 400 companies that we have multi-employer agreements with. And it's enabling. The two have to come together and negotiate that benefit into their collective bargaining agreements. This allows them that opportunity, and I'd be glad to answer any questions on that.
Are there any questions from the members? Hearing none, I thank you, Mr. Sabatoni, and have a good evening.
I thank you all, and thank you all the members of the committee. Have a safe night. Thank you.
Next, we have Tomas Avila from the Millennial Latino Institute. Mr. Avila, you're on.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good evening. It gives me great pleasure to testify on behalf of this bill. And the reason I am here testifying about it because I'm very familiar with it. I've seen it evolve since back in 2017 when Governor Gino Raimondo put in place the Diversity in Construction Working Group, and that group made a lot of research, took a lot of testimony from contractors, and they put a very solid and informative report back in 2018, collecting all the data and showing the need for prompt payment. Furthermore, back in 2019, I was appointed by Governor Raimondo to the Diversity in Construction Steering Committee. And that particular committee was charged with developing initiatives to address industry-specific challenges in the following areas: training, access to capital, and workforce and prompt payment. So I participated for a whole year in that particular committee, looking at those three sets of needs in our community. But the prompt payment was very key. And it is because we all have seen and experienced minority business going out of business because of the lack of capital, and most importantly, having work to be done and not getting paid in a timely basis. And in many cases, as I have described it to many individuals, financing the contractors who get paid in a timely basis, delay their payment to the subcontractors, and it is damaging our construction industry, the minority construction industry. So therefore, I feel that this bill is actually needed. I know there was a test pilot program that was put in place last year. I'm also aware that because of COVID, everything was delayed to this year. But the need, if anything, it has only risen because we know that COVID has changed everything and it has made many things more difficult. And needless to say, the lack of access to capital is one of those. So I'll be very brief, but I wanted to testify in favor of this bill, and I hope you will vote to approve it and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members? Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Avila. Have a good
Thank you very much.
I would like to submit in the record that Greg Mancini, Build Rhode Island, was for this bill. Michael Sabatoni, president of RIBCTC, was for this bill. Kerry Bennett, executive director of Associated General Contractors, is for this bill. And that concludes the hearing on 5475. Moving right along to House Bill 5722 by Representative Edwards. Is Representative Edwards online?
Yes, I am.
Please proceed, Representative.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate it. This is another great piece of legislation from the East Bay that will benefit contractors and workers throughout Rhode Island. Contractors will benefit from this bill because they get to have apprentices on their payroll who work on an increasing, sliding scale for a rate that is less than the journey person's rate on prevailing wage projects. This is a benefit because they get a reduced rate for the labor while they are taking the time to have these people trained. The workers, in turn, get trained in a skill that they can use for the rest of their lives and make a good amount of money, a good living wage that they can bring money home for their families. They can buy homes, they can buy cars, they can live a real life on a living wage through the apprenticeship program. Apprenticeship programs are generally 4 years. I don't know of any program that's longer, and it is an invaluable part of the construction industry. We desperately need young people to enter the construction trades so that people like me can eventually get out of them. That concludes my testimony, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Edwards. Are there any questions for Representative Edwards? Representative Alzate?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Representative Edwards. It is so important that we, I want to say continue to have the conversation, but I know that we got away from trades in high school. It is so important that we stress how important, going into the trades are, and also they're great jobs. It's a great career to have, any trades, and especially construction. I've always said that if I probably had the ability or the chance to be exposed to being a woman in construction, I probably would have gone that route. Except I didn't, and now I'm blessed to be part of the House of Reps. But I thank you, Representative Edwards, for just stressing how important it is that trades are great jobs, great benefits, a great living wage, and a great respectable job, so a career. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rep. And we desperately need plumbers, electricians, pipe fitters, carpenters. We need these people in our society because we have so much to build.
Are there any other questions for Representative Edwards? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would like to call on Mr. Devon Miles. Mr. Miles?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Miles, if you could turn down the volume on your device, it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I got it. Yes, ma'am.
You need to turn it down some more.
Madam Chair, before you get off, I'd like to ask Mr. Miles a question.
Mr. Miles, sweetie?
I got it.
You need to turn it off.
It is off.
Now it sounds much better. Thank you, love.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry about that.
Please proceed.
Honorable Chairwoman Anastasia Williams and members of the committee, my name is Devon Miles. I am CEO and owner of Atlantis Comfort System, a heating and air conditioning contractor in Rhode Island. I'm here to comment on Bill 5722 and to state my position. I am opposed to this bill. Before I continue, I'd like to make a small rebuttal to Mr. Sabatini and the other member who discussed that this bill is good because of the fact that it helps small businesses. The problem with the current bill right now, in order to hire apprentices, the companies that need to hire them have to have an increased racial amount. My company itself cannot hire another person because of the current state mandates on legislation of apprenticeship ratios. Every company out there in our trades, in plumbing, electrical, and all the other ones that are in the mechanical, electrical, fire protection, and so forth, are at their max. So therefore, the premise of being good for the state of Rhode Island is incorrect. We are no longer allowed to hire any employees, and the policing of this policy is very stringent. So now, before I start, I'd like to comment on a conversation I had with an organization that said, that asked me to join. Their thing was to decrease the supply of labor, in turn, increases the demand for labor, which drives up the labor, resulting in the decrease of competition. And the final statement at the end of our conversation, this is a beautiful thing. Now, I'm here for such hearings such as these for two parts of that mission statement. The first one is the driving force of the decrease the supply of labor, and the last one is the decreased competition. This last part of the mission, decreased competition, is why I'm here today. This new legislation will actually, beyond a shadow of a doubt, decrease competition in the marketplace for the people to participate in the Rhode Island state and city-funded projects. And that, in turn, will fulfill the mission to decrease competition. I am a very positive person. I've been this way my whole life. I love Rhode Island. My father was in the military. I moved every 3 to 4 years. In my past job, I moved even more than that. I finally settled in Rhode Island. I always believe that Rhode Island is a good state to live in, and I live in Rhode Island for the past 30 years. And the fact that it has people such as you, Mrs. Chairwoman Williams, that Rhode Island is a place for people of color. I am half Japanese and half Afro-American. No worries. I've always said this is a good area to get married and raise a family, and I did that. That should tell you what I think about Rhode Island. However, I am starting to see a trend. I'm starting to see something I have never seen since I've been in this state. Maybe I just didn't notice. For the first time in living in Rhode Island, I realized something I thought I would never say. The state is now starting to take on policies and legislation that I believe are heading in the direction of unintentional, this is the word, unintentional racism and discrimination. Right now, policies have it so that way we cannot hire people. And when you can't hire people and the government is enforcing that not hiring of people, that is a problem. This particular bill focuses on and intentionally targets small businesses because small businesses don't have these apprenticeship programs. They don't have the sophistication, and sometimes they don't even have the desire. So these small businesses, however, most of them make up a bunch of minorities, and that's where my undercurrent of racism comes in. I'm pleading that you not go there. I don't think you understand that these people that you're saying that, oh, you got to join and do what we do, or you can't work for the state of Rhode Island is problematic. I don't think we need to be serving the special interest groups or organizations that are asking for this type of legislation. So, my company has a registered apprenticeship program. The legislation does not affect us. We don't care. We have almost 300 employees. But you ask yourself, how did I get that way? By taking 90% of my business and went to other states. In this state, due to current legislation, I cannot hire any more residents in the state of Rhode Island for my trade to work in this state. That is incredibly sad. So I work in other states and hire other people in other states so I can grow my business. So why do I even care? Or why should I? Or why do I? Because this legislation, like some of the previous legislation, is flat out discriminatory, no doubt. It is designed to prevent small businesses from participating in Rhode Island work, specifically Rhode Island work that will now become some of the largest work we will be doing in the future. And now I'm starting to see these trends of unintentional racism creeping up into the disguise that this is all under the umbrella. This is good for Rhode Island by having additional apprentices. I want to hire those apprentices. So I started to get involved. The state of Rhode Island is preventing me from hiring these apprentices, even though you're drafting legislation encouraging to get apprentices. The legislation is worthless unless you allow us to hire more apprentices. Legislation, its intent is good, but it doesn't work. At the end of the day, what it will do is decrease the number of people and decrease the number of companies able to participate in this work. Lastly, if an apprenticeship program is so important at the level you are requesting, why aren't the other companies such as framers, steelworkers, concrete, masonry companies required to have these programs? Why only state-mandated apprenticeships? Well, most of those companies have organizations that say that this is really a dumb idea because this type of state and city policing of these types of requirements would prevent them from growth and impede their flexibility, that the flexibility they require to have their workforce size. They know better. I do not see any of these types of subcontractors on that list of state-mandated apprenticeship programs, and those types of companies deal in massive amounts of life safety issues. Those buildings can fall, the concrete could crack, all those other things, but they don't have any apprenticeship programs because the fact that those organizations that are behind them know that it is very stupid for them to have. They have their own apprenticeship program. I think everybody should have their own apprenticeship program. They should register it accordingly, but the state policing of it is where the problem is.
Thank you, Mr.
I appreciate your time regarding this matter, and I welcome any further dialogue.
Well,
if
there's going to be
requests it.
some right now, darling, because you done awoke and you done entertain an invitation to Shanae to come to ask you to elaborate on a few things you said. First and foremost,
I would love to do that.
I would love to hear how long you said you came to Rhode Island and been here.
I've been here over 30 years, ma'am. I only counted 30 years because that's how long I've been in the HVAC industry. I was in another industry before that.
That's okay.
Probably close to 35.
Hold on. I gave you a whole lot of time to say what you had to say, and I greatly appreciate it, and I need to get my time in here. Thank you, darling. 30 years. And now you are noticing the discrimination that is so vividly now. And it's been going on 30 years when you got here and throughout those 30 years. So I appreciate you elaborating that it exists and that you see it. But where you been through our struggle, darling? It didn't skip a beat. And you evidently knew about it because you're so eloquently talking about it today. And it's welcoming. But my question is, where you been for the last 30 years when we needed that ally to speak like you're speaking this evening? So,
could I answer that?
No, hold on. I need to say what I got to say.
Sorry about that.
People like me here, it's a good place to live and raise a family. And then you throw in people of color. See me when you need me and use me for your convenience. Again, obviously, you may have had good intention, but you know what? I am insulted based on your presentation to all of a sudden it's important. It's a good place for you to have come. You love Rhode Island and you have done well in Rhode Island, but guess what? Our struggle still continues and is real. So please, when you speak about us, know about the struggle and don't present what you believe it is conveniently for your presentation tonight or any night. I am not saying you did not make a point, because you clearly did. But it's like I asked, where you been for the last 30 years? The struggle did not skip a beat. 300 employees. 300 employees. How many of them look like me? And now you can answer those two questions with regards to the first question and this last question. And please, you can answer that in less than 60 seconds, please. Or not answer it at all, and I won't take any offense.
First of all, in your first question, what I brought up was in reference to my work trade, okay? This started changing more often in the last, more so in the last 7 to 5 years.
Wrong, darling. That's the answer you gave.
I'm only talking about my work trade.
That's
the construction
okay.
industry, ma'am. That's
Thank
it.
you.
I'm not, that's all I'm talking about.
Okay, that's
So,
okay. I appreciate that answer.
Yes, I'm not, I mean, don't get me wrong. I participated in, these events in the whole 9 yards. But right now, I'm not here to further that cause. I'm only here talking about this particular piece of legislation and how it impacts. Okay? Number two, I employ quite a few Latinos, minorities, and women in my business.
I did not ask you what nationality. I asked you how many of your 300 employees look like me. That being Latino, Southeast Asian, African American. Out of the 300, how many of them you employ that looks like me?
About 60.
60 out of 300. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Miles. Are there any other questions to Mr. Miles? Representative Edwards, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Mr. Miles could leave his information with the clerk, I will contact him and talk to him about the bill. On a personal level, Mr. Miles and I worked together in his other industry some more than 30 years ago in Baltimore together.
35.
Yeah, probably 35 years ago. So, and he was my boss then.
Well, that's interesting. 35 years ago, the struggle was still real. And I appreciate all that you presented, Mr. Miles. In fact, I'm going to use your testimony in forums when I move forward, because it was very interesting and appreciated. Trust me when I say it, sincerely. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Miles. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
I would like the record to reflect that Christopher Whitney provided a phone number, but the phone service is not on. Maureen Grillo, Association Builders, Contractors, is against this bill. Greg Mancini and Michael Sabatoni, both were for it. They testified earlier. Bill Rhode Island, President of RIBCTC. Matt Weldon from Department of Training, Labor and Training is for this bill. Brian Daniels, Rhode Island League of Cities and Town, is opposing this bill. David Allard from RIBC is opposing this bill. And that concludes the hearing on 5722. Moving right along to Representative Ruggiero, 5723. Representative Ruggiero, welcome. Good
Yes.
evening.
Thank you, Chairwoman, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill tonight. This bill before you creates additional employment opportunities for people with disabilities. If they start a business or become a sole prop of a business, this legislation gives them a chance to bid on state government contracts or become a subcontractor. It's actually based on the women-owned business and minority-owned business and veterans-owned business. The federal government has established a threshold for federal contracts to reach 7% of business with people with disabilities. This bill establishes a state goal, and I say a goal because it's not a mandate, for 3% for state procurement of contracts by June of 2023. There is no fiscal impact. As a matter of fact, this would actually reduce the state supplemental security income, SSI, when people with differing abilities become employed. There is just a minor drafting error on page 5, line 11. It should read August 2022, not August of 2020. So the Governor's Office on Disability supports this bill, and you'll hear from Bob Cooper as well as Access Point, Rhode Island. So thank you for hearing the bill, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I would actually defer to those who probably know a lot more about it than I do, but thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ruggiero. Are there any questions? Next on line is Mr. Bob Cooper from the Governor's Commission. Mr. Cooper, good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Please proceed.
All right. The Governor's Commission on Disabilities believes we need to start to employ folks with disabilities rather than to keep them unemployed. At the present time, Rhode Island has the lowest percentage of employment of people with disabilities in New England. Not where we want to be at the bottom. Although we do, for the 25,000 or so adults with disabilities who are in the labor force and are employed, they actually make, in terms of their average earnings, the second highest in New England. On the other hand, as you know, and I'm sure your committee knows, many communities that have difficulty getting over past discriminatory barriers end up having to open their own business because they can't get employed elsewhere. Rhode Island, unfortunately, has the second lowest percentage of self-employed people who have disabilities. The bill is designed to help businesses, business owners who have a disability or somebody who has a disability and can't get employed start their own business. And also will, as some of your earlier bills on your agenda, address the issue of potentially becoming subcontractors. A lot of this effort grew out of the fact that the U.S. Department of Justice sued both the state of Rhode Island and the Providence school system a number of years ago for running a job training program that created a pipeline from the Birch Vocational School in Providence that only services students with disabilities into a nonprofit that not only paid less than minimum wage, in most cases paid less than $1 an hour. The state of Rhode Island is still under the district court in its attempt to finally shift its policy to employment of folks with disabilities at a living wage. And I'm sure you would not be surprised to learn that Birch Vocational School drew most of its students not from the east side, but from the south side of Providence. In fact, Rhode Island has one of the highest set of barriers for workers of color who have disabilities in getting into getting jobs and getting into the labor force. Be very happy to answer any questions you or the committee would have.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Representative McEntee?
Madam Chair, I'd like to be acknowledged as being present and have my vote recorded in the affirmative, please.
James? So moved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions for Mr. Cooper? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Cooper, for your testimony. Moving right along to Mr. Rory Carmody. Mr. Carmody, good evening. Please proceed. Mr. Carmody, welcome.
Hi.
Rory, Miss Carmody.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I'm happy to ask for your support for this bill. I think this is an important piece of legislation for people with disabilities. I am the acting chair of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, but at my day job, I'm a director of employment services for Access Point, Rhode Island, and we have fought long and hard for the habilitation plan to provide opportunities for people with disabilities to have the same access to good-paying jobs as their non-disabled counterparts. At Access Point, we do have a habilitation contract with the Department of Administration at the Hazard Building. And I just want to say that for all the individuals who work there, it has been a most meaningful opportunity for them. It has allowed them to work, to gain some income, to pay some taxes. And even during the COVID pandemic, every single person showed up every single day. We didn't miss a day of work over there. Employment is important to people. It's particularly important to people with disabilities who've been disenfranchised from the employment arena. And I think any opportunity that we can do as a state to provide more opportunities is a good thing. People want to work, they're able to work, and we have a lot of people who are looking for work. So anything we can do as a state to increase those opportunities for people, we really should do. I am cognizant of the fact of how many vendors the state of Rhode Island has. It would be wonderful if we could also compel those same vendors to hire people with disabilities. So agencies don't just have to go after habilitation contracts, but we can see people become even more mainstream in their employment with different businesses throughout the state of Rhode Island.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Thank you, Ms. Carmody.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mr. Robert Marshall, who's has no position on this bill. Mr. Marshall, you have stated you have no position on this bill. Please, can you please lower or turn down your...
It's off.
Thank you. Can you proceed?
Yes. I'm here on behalf of the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council. We took a look at this. We want this committee to give it serious consideration. It does provide the opportunity for real jobs for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You just heard someone talk about some of those jobs. But also, we have been working hard with individuals that want to become self-employed to train them to be self-employed, and this gives them places that they can go and sell those services once they develop them. We think that if we can hit that 3%, it'd be great, and move on past it, move it up at that point. But we really would like to see these opportunities become real. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Are there any questions for Mr. Marshall? Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
I would like the record to reflect that Bob Cooper from the Governor's Commission on Disability is for this bill. Kiernan T. O'Donnell from RIAPSE had no position. And Dorinda Keene from ODEO is opposing this bill. And that would conclude the hearing on 5723. Moving right along to 5856 by Representative Hawkins. Representative Hawkins, are you with us? He is absent. House Bill 5856. This act would relieve regulatory burden by authorizing submission of certified payroll using federal forms for all public works. This act would take effect upon passage. And we have Bill Walsh from the construction industry supports the bill and is online. Mr. Walsh.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
It's great to be with you. It's great to be with you and members of the Labor Committee in prime time this evening. This is Bill Walsh on behalf of the construction industries of Rhode Island here in support of H 5856. I'd like to thank Representative Hawkins for his sponsorship. I know you have a packed agenda, so I'll be very brief. This is a simple bill. In fact, it only inserts two words, the words, quote, or other. But it can provide some real relief for contractors. It's requesting to adopt a procedure in place for Department of Transportation Public Works, which is the acceptance of certified payrolls using federal forms to other public works projects. This would relieve some burdens on contractors who have to rework their systems to produce, similar or even sometimes identical forms for different entities when requested. And so we think that this would help us spend more time doing the public works rather than the paperwork associated with it in the back office. So we understand there may be some concerns from different reporting entities. We're happy to work with folks on the issue, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Missing you.
Have a great evening, Chair. I miss you too.
I would like the record to reflect that Matt Weldon from Department of Labor and Training is opposing this bill. Savannah Wainwright, Executive Director of NUCARI, is for this bill. And that concludes the hearing on 5856. Moving right along to 5938 by Representative Ranglin Vessel. Is Representative Vessel available? Representative Ranglin Vessel is not present. This bill will provide for an increase in the minimum wage commencing July 1st of 2021 to $13 per hour with a dollar increase to that amount on July 1st, 22 and July 1st, 23. That act would further provide for an annual increase thereafter commencing July 1st, 2024 to an amount calculated to be equal to an increase in the cost of living using the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumer Northeast region. The act also provides for a temporary increase to the minimum wage for in-person work performed during a declared emergency and would provide for civil penalties of $100 per day for each violation of the minimum wage provision. This act would take effect upon passage. I would like the record to reflect that everybody that signed up to speak on this bill is for the bill. There's only one individual that opposes it. I would ask each person that is for the bill to make their presentation by adding anything that the previous speaker had not added. Don't be redundant. Don't repeat the same thing over that was already said. It will be greatly appreciated, and we are here listening and waiting for your testimony. And with that being said, I hope that you would, I oblige the request. First witness is Mr. David Velis. Mr. Velis?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson and committee members, and thank you for having me tonight. My name is David Velis. I'm the director and lead organizer of the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, and we're here tonight to strongly support the passage of this bill. As a coalition of faith leaders, congregation members, service and advocacy organizations across the state who have come together to fight poverty, we recognize the critical need to raise the minimum wage. Rhode Islanders working full-time, earning the current minimum wage, do not make enough to meet basic needs. A single-parent family with 2 children needs an annual household income of close to $63,000, and a person making the current minimum wage doesn't even make $25,000. There has been some anxiety expressed in regards to increasing the minimum wage. Will it negatively impact job creation in our state, harming those it's meant to help? And the answer is clearly no. Analysis conducted by the National Employment Law Project found that raising the minimum wage helps low-income people without reducing overall employment or job growth to any significant degree. Now more than ever, we must help working-class families. The pandemic has highlighted and magnified the inequality that exists in our society and our state. Economic disparity is only increasing. We cannot wait any longer. We need to raise the minimum wage now. It isn't lost on us that $15 isn't what it used to be, so the longer we wait, the less impact it will have. I'll leave you with a quote from one of our sacred texts. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet the need. I thank you for your time. I thank you for passing this bill and for supporting families in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Thank you, Mr. Velis.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Next caller, Kelly Nevins. Good evening, Kelly Nevins. Please
Thank you, Chair Williams.
Please proceed.
Great. I'm here tonight to support Bill 6102, 5938, and 5939, all of which have increases to the minimum wage with a path to $15 an hour, including an increase in the tipped wage as it relates to Bill 6102. I have submitted written testimony with data and facts, but I wanted to share some additional thoughts tonight during my verbal testimony. This year, the pandemic has caused unprecedented job losses, predominantly in the service and caregiving sectors. And prior to the pandemic, women made up 51% of Rhode Island's workforce. Yet nearly 6 in 10 of minimum wage workers were women. Because of the issues that the pandemic has brought, it has caused something that we've been terming a she-cession. And those who've been able to continue to work through the pandemic have done so at the risk of their health. And to thank them, we've called them heroes and essential workers, but we haven't paid them that way. The current Rhode Island standard of need shows that an individual needs at least $14.70 an hour to cover her necessities. We know from research that the average minimum wage worker is a woman over the age of 35 with some college experience, who's working full-time and likely to be a parent. With 40% of women being the main breadwinners for their families, and with so many of them working for minimum wage, we're creating more poverty by not paying people appropriately for their work. As the CEO of the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, I have to admit I'm frustrated that Rhode Island as a state and we as a country feel it's fair to expect that people who we consider to be heroes to be paid a minimum wage that puts them at poverty levels, even when they're working full-time. Why is it okay to pay to some people so little for full-time work that they still need to visit food banks or access supplemental government support? We ask these workers to care for our children, care for our parents, serve us in a variety of ways, and we should be paying them a salary that ensures that they're able to pay for food, a safe place to live, and other basic necessities. Anyone who works full-time should be paid a minimum wage that allows them to pay for basic needs where they live, and that's why these bills are so important. Now, the tipped minimum wage is its own special kind of hell, and I apologize for swearing. It's a little relic of slavery that was started when restaurant owners did not want to pay black workers after emancipation. Today's tipped workers are now 70% women who not only work hard physically in demanding jobs while having to endure economic security, but they also endure the highest rates of sexual harassment in any industry because they have to tolerate inappropriate customer behavior or be docked in tips. Imagine being asked to remove your mask and smile pretty for the customer so they can decide what to tip you that day. If we must continue a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, let's at least ensure that these tipped workers can pay for their basic needs as well. I and the thousands of women that I represent through the Women's Fund tonight ask you, our leaders, that you recognize minimum wage workers as essential to our economy and to our community, and set minimum wages going forward that ensure that they will be economically secure when living and working in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Are there any questions to Ms. Nevins? Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Moving right along to Magdalena Sirignata. Could you please lower your system, Magdalena?
Yes.
Please
Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Would you proceed?
Hi, my name is Madalena Chirignota. Thank you, Madam Chair and Labor Committee members, for your time. I'm strongly in support of this bill for a number of reasons. What with the recent testimony, the last one in particular, just took many of the words right out of my mouth. But I would like to add a teacher's perspective to this as well. I've been a public school teacher for 15 years, and on a regular basis, I see the way poverty impacts children. And I see the disadvantages that they're put at because of their family's poverty. And I think that the least that we could do in caring for children is to be able to provide their parents with a living wage that would allow them to provide for their children. I see, and there's minor things that are less important, but still to that individual child extremely important, such as sports. Parents are working so many hours to put food on the table that they can't take their child to sports, so they can't commit to them. They can't go and watch their children play sports and partake in that with them. Sometimes they can't pay for equipment, so their children just don't get to partake in sports at all because their family just simply can't finance that. I see it with academics to an extreme degree. When there's nobody at home to help them do their homework, they don't do their homework, especially if it's something that's challenging, so they have a lot more trouble progressing. A lot of students actually have part-time jobs to help put food on the table. I've had numerous students who have to work a part-time job to help their mom just pay their bills. At minimum, many of them have to get up early and feed their younger siblings breakfast before they go to school, or help to get them on the bus because their parents are already at work. Many of my students who live in poverty make dinner so that when their parents get home, it's already made, because by the time their parents get home, it's too late for their parents to do so. When are these kids supposed to focus on their academics? It's really heartbreaking to see the difference in the quality of life and the quality of education that these kids have simply because they're financially disadvantaged by no fault of their own. And their parents work. They work hard. And they just don't make enough per hour to be able to make their ends meet. I know I testified about this last year because I so strongly support these bills, these increase in minimum wage bills. But I had a student 2 years ago who disappeared on me for an entire week. And, after some follow-up, I found out that she had stopped coming to school so she could take extra shifts at work to help her mother who had lost her job, because her mother didn't make enough money that they had a reserve So they needed to pay their bills that month, and she had to work instead of going to school. Virtual learning is augmenting this to a degree that I have never seen. The discrepancies we always talk about equity, but the discrepancies in equity are really, really coming out. When there's a child that doesn't have a parent that can stay home with them, they're not going to succeed. So in closing, I strongly, strongly support all of the bills that increase the minimum wage. I think 5938 is a wonderful bill, and I very strongly, I am grateful to the sponsors for having put it in, and I support it with all my heart.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I would ask, Magdalena, you also signed up for 5939. So would that be the same testimony, because pretty much it's the same request on the bills?
Yes, it is. I actually wondered what the point was in speaking twice, because the previous person who just spoke really said many of the things I intended to.
Okay.
And I had the same thing to say about both of these wonderful bills.
Okay.
I did want to also say that 6012 to increase the wage for tipped workers is another one that I feel strongly needs to happen, but I'm happy to testify separately for that one.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions to Ms. Magdalena? Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too, Madam Chairwoman.
Georgia Hollister Isman. I would like the record to reflect that Zachary Taylor, it went to voicemail twice. Christopher Carlozzi, my friend.
How are you tonight, Madam Chair?
Wonderful, and yourself?
I'm doing all right, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and provide comments on behalf of NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business. We represent many of the industries hardest hit by the pandemic, like retail, hospitality, tourism, and industries that would also be most impacted by minimum wage increases. So I will keep this very brief because we provided comments at past hearings on this topic, but would like to reiterate some of our concerns as to why we oppose these bills, 5938, 5939, and 6012, that all raise the minimum wage. Of particular concern are the bills calling for the wage increase to begin in July, which could prove even more devastating than an October wage increase. Most small businesses anticipate their recovery to take at least until the end of 2021, if not longer. And if conditions do begin to improve as summer nears with vaccines and less infection rate and things starting to improve through the economy, you're certainly going to want those seasonal jobs that'll be there for a tourism industry that was hit particularly hard last year. And this raising of the minimum wage, especially if that happens in July, would hurt an already fragile tourism and hospitality industry. I'd also like to add that the tipped wage and raising the tipped wage at this time would hurt those struggling restaurants, and it would do harm to those restaurants and the workers. I often cite when testifying on this topic, and I have in the past, that in the state of Maine, when they did phase out the tipped wage, that it led to servers themselves going into committee hearings and talking to legislators about reversing that decision, because they did see a decrease in their take-home pay when that happened. So once again, like tourism, restaurants are a very fragile sector in the Rhode Island economy, and it was an industry that was hurt the most year over year. We saw the greatest reduction in job loss from before the pandemic to during. So to conclude, higher labor costs as businesses attempt to recover will have consequences, and whether that means higher prices, fewer hours for workers, or unfortunately lost jobs, small businesses will need to find a way to offset those cost increases. So I certainly appreciate the time tonight, and I will not keep you any further unless you have any questions.
Thank goodness, Mr. Carlozzi, you sent us written testimony and then you're going to read it to us. It's like, whoa, you know?
Oh, no, the written testimony is completely separate.
Oh, in addition, torture, come on.
I have a lot to say, Madam Chair, sometimes.
Thank you for your testimony. See you the next round, okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a nice night.
Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Next, we'll have Georgia Hollister Isman.
Hello?
Ms. Isman, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair Williams. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I want to support 5938 and 5939 with this testimony. You've heard a lot about the basic reasons to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. In fact, we were also here a couple weeks ago testifying on Rep. Bennett's bill, so I won't repeat all of that. I think we think it's urgently important. I want to say a word about some of the other pieces of these two bills other than just increasing the minimum wage, and a little bit about how they differ from each other. The first is staying competitive staying on track with our neighbors. As you probably know, Connecticut and Rhode Island are both on track to reach $15 an hour minimum wage in early 2023. 5938 provides a schedule that increases the Rhode Island minimum wage to reach 15 in July of 2023. That's a very good thing for keeping on track with our neighbors. The timeline is slightly longer in 5939 as it was in 5130, which you guys heard a few weeks ago. Also, both of these bills do something very important in terms of after the minimum wage reaches $15 an hour, tying it to inflation through the consumer price index so that $15 an hour doesn't continue to lose value as the price of everything else goes up. And so that we don't have to have quite so many long nights testifying year after year for increases in the minimum wage. So that's a very important aspect of both of these bills. Both of these bills have an increase for tipped workers, which is super important. 5938 is equivalent to the Senate bill that increases the tipped wage to half of the minimum wage. 5939 phases the tipped minimum wage out completely over a much longer timeline. I think it's 7 years. This is incredibly important, as you've heard from many people, because of the number of Rhode Islanders who work in those tipped jobs and the number of women and people of color who work in them, even more disproportionately in Rhode Island than other places. 72% of Rhode Island's tipped workers are women. For all these reasons, we think these are both really strong $15 an hour minimum wage bills, and I hope this committee and the House will move forward a $15 an hour minimum wage bill, and we would strongly urge you to consider some of these aspects that are in these two when you do that. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on 5938, and we're moving right along for those who have not had a chance to testify on 5939. But I would also like the record to reflect that on 5938, Lynette Forey Menard, Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, is opposing this bill. Guido Petrosinelli, Rhode Island Franchisee Association, is opposing the bill. Stephen Authors, President, CEO, Rhode Island Food Dealers Association, is opposing the bill. Kelly Nevin, CEO, Women's Fund Rhode Island, is for the bill. Nicholas Olivier, Executive Director, Rhode Island Partnership Home Care, is opposing the bill. Jordan Goyette, Warwick resident, for the bill. Bethany Souza Foster, now Rhode Island, for the bill. Zachary Taylor, East Greenwich resident, for the bill. Paige Clausius Parks, Kids Count, for the bill. Alan Krinsky, the Economic Progress Institute, for the bill. Matthew Thabai, Teamsters Local 251, is for the bill. Tanya Harris, Executive Director, Coalition Against Domestic Violence, is for the bill. Christopher Carlozzi, which we just heard from, NFIB, is opposing the bill, and Georgia Hollister Isman, Rhode Island Working Family, is for the bill, and we heard her testimony as well. And that concludes the hearing on 5938, moving right along to 5939, to the individuals that did not get a chance to testify. Sarah Bratko. Ms. Bracco, you're on.
Good evening. As you stated, my name is Sarah Bracco here on behalf of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. We have submitted written testimony on the pieces of legislation up for hearing tonight, and much of our testimony was already addressed in previous testimony. So in the interest of time and everybody's, what is sure to be a long night, I will limit my testimony to the immediate impact that this will have in our industry here in Rhode Island. Our industry, in all honesty, is in absolute turmoil, and we are continuing to struggle to keep our doors open while navigating the challenges of COVID. Our latest meals and beverage tax data shows a 32.5% decline in restaurant revenue compared to that same month in 2019, and on the hotel side, it's down over 60%. So just in light of what is going on in our industry, we ask that the committee consider the economic impact that this legislation will have on our industry and consider postponing conversations on this legislation until next year. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions to the witness? No, there isn't. Thank you very much, Ms. Bracco, for your testimony.
All right, bye-bye.
That concludes the hearing on 5939, and for the record, we had Guido Petrosanelli, Rhode Island Franchise Association, against this bill, Kelly Nevin, CEO, Women's Fund, for this bill, Stephen Arthurs, President, CEO, Rhode Island Food Dealers, against this bill, Laura Marie Picciota, Executive Director of Mental Health Association, Rhode Island, for this bill, Bailey Peralta, Mental Health Association, for this bill, Nicholas Oliver, Executive Director, Rhode Island Partnership Home Care, opposing the bill, Jordan Goyette, Warwick resident, for the bill, Bethany Souza Foster, now Rhode Island, pro this bill, Hannah Mackey is for this bill, Melissa Gonzalez, Providence resident, for this bill, Bridget Kenahan, East Providence resident, for this bill, Paige Clauses Park, Kids Count, for the bill, Alan Krinsky, the Economic Progress Institute, for the bill, Matthew Tybee, Teamsters Local 251, for the bill, Tanya Harris, Executive Director, Coalition Against Domestic Violence, for the bill, Christopher Carlozzi, NFIB, opposes the bill, Georgia Hollister Isman, Rhode Island Working Families, for the bill. And that concludes the hearing on 5939. Moving right along, and I would like to call up out of order, go to House Bill 6011 by Representative Baptista. Proceed, Representative Baptista.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you folks today. House Bill 6011 is a bill that would amend the Healthy and Safe Families Act to ensure that construction workers would be included in the definition of folks who can accrue paid sick time. This would apply to folks who are working under a collective bargaining agreement, and the terms of the bill would make it that folks would accrue a minimum of 1 hour per 35-hour work week and a maximum of 40 hours per work year. And as Mr. Sabatoni testified earlier, construction workers are currently not included in this provision, and so this bill would amend it so that they can accrue paid sick time just like everybody else. And I didn't realize it at the moment, but I think it's appropriate given that my predecessor in District 12, former Representative Almeida, was a construction worker, and so I'm grateful for the opportunity to present this to the committee.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Please know, Representative Baptista, you will need to put in the request for the amendments. So it's not just where I'll do it to you for a favor or none of that kind of stuff. You got to do a little homework on your own.
Correct.
So I'm giving you some suggestions with good intentions.
Thank you.
At this time, we have Anita Bruno from the Rhode Island Women's in the Trades. Ms. Bruno, please proceed briefly. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, committee, for listening. I'd like to say that I support Bill 6011. I support Bill 6011 because being a carpenter, if we don't work, we don't get paid. Being a single mom, I've had days where my son had throw up in school and he would automatically be exempt from going to school for 2 more days, 48 hours. So extending the hours that we can have for sick time would be very beneficial for family members that are in the construction field. Thank you.
She's also on 6012 if you want to have her continue.
Ms. Bruno, you're also on 6012. You want to make a comment with that? Ms. Bruno?
Yes.
Would you?
Which bill is that? I'm sorry.
6012 by Representative Felix. Tip minimum wage?
Yes.
Briefly,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you. I support Bill 6012 as I waitress my way through college, understanding that $3.20 an hour. Certain days, if you're a new waitress, you get the really bad shift, so you might be lucky to make $25 in tips that day. If you're counting $25 a day for 5 days, that's not a lot of money. And then the $3.20 an hour after 40-hour week, you're lucky to get $100 after they take taxes out. So, yes, please raise the minimum tip wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Ms. Bruno.
Thank you.
Okay. We will go back to Christopher Whitney, who had, we was having telephone difficulty, but he's on the line now. Mr. Whitney, please
Yes.
proceed. Welcome and please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I want to thank you so much for accommodating me. I don't know what happened. I'm in a hotel for the birth of a granddaughter, and the internet was on the blink.
Well,
So
that's
thank
what
you very
happened.
much.
You was at a party, honey, darling. That's what happened. Now, come on.
I wish. I'll try to keep the noise down here. Madam Chairwoman, I'm here on behalf of Rhode Island Associated Builders and Contractors in strong opposition to Bill 5722, the apprenticeship bill. Madam Chairwoman, Rhode Island ABC has opposed this bill for many years and for very good reason. There is no question but that what Representative Edwards and others said and Mr. Sabatoni about the benefits of apprenticeship. Nobody disagrees with that. And the reality is we got a real problem. We have a labor shortage, too many journeymen retiring, not enough apprentices taking their place. The problem is, respectfully, this bill does not effectively address that issue and is not going to increase apprenticeship opportunities. So much of the bill, Madam Chairwoman, that addresses essentially a goal of having 15% of the hours on a given public project, school project, going to apprentices, that it may not be realistic, but it's fine to have a goal like that. We don't strongly oppose that. What we oppose strongly is the mandatory requirement that any bidder bidding on any of these projects must participate in a state-approved apprenticeship program for every trade within its workforce. The reality is that is actually going to decrease apprenticeship opportunities in our industry. It's not going to increase them, and I'd like to explain why that is. First of all, with respect to the unionized side, by the way, ABC, as I think many people on this committee know, Associated Builders, is a merit shop, a contractor organization. We are not anti-union in any manner, shape, or form. We simply believe that anybody should be able to conduct their business in the way that they see fit, and the merit shop does not engage in collective bargaining and the signatory contractor system. So we just do it differently. We're not anti-union. But the reality is that this bill will not make any difference whatsoever. Let's start with the union side. Any difference in terms of apprenticeship opportunities on the union side. Why is that? Because every signatory contractor in the state of Rhode Island is already deemed to participate in an approved apprenticeship program for all trades within its workforce, whether they ever hire an apprentice or not. In other words, you can be a union contractor, and you could have gone the last 15 years and never have hired an apprentice, but you are deemed to participate in the apprenticeship program because of the collective bargaining agreement that sets up the apprenticeship training program. So that everybody needs to understand, I hope, that this bill will make no difference whatsoever in terms of signatory contractors increasing apprenticeship opportunities. Contrary-wise, on the merit shop side, it's important that everybody realize we support apprenticeship. Many of our members, including Mr. Miles' company, Atlantic Comfort Systems, have state registered apprenticeship programs, and every year train apprentices. The problem is we also have many smaller shops that are very competent, that have done state work for years and can do it successfully, but they're not large enough to afford to participate in an apprenticeship program, much less for each of their apprenticeable trades. And if they're a small shop, say a family operation, 5, 6, 7 employees, done state work for years successfully, they wouldn't be able to bid for any of this work, because to comply with this, they would have to they would first of all have to set up apprenticeship programs, which in many cases they can't afford. Secondly, they would have to continually be graduating apprentices from that program year after year to keep in compliance. And they either don't want to grow or they can't afford to grow. Yet many on the merit shop side, as I said, do already have apprenticeship programs. Many of them, because of the onerous aspects of this act, are going to be disincentivized to bid on this work. So what's going to happen, purely and simply and clearly, is that this bill, which is simply going to hurt the merit shop side and keep many qualified merit shop contractors that have bid work for years, and it's going to keep them from doing that. Now, quickly and finally, because I appreciate the time you give me, I've studied and written extensively on apprenticeship issues. It's an incredible problem, this labor shortage. And I've written about what we need to do to deal with it, and it's not just mandate that everybody participate in the apprenticeship program, because that's not going to work. What needs to happen is the legislature needs to address the journeyman to apprentice ratio. And I want to just pick up briefly and finally on what Devon Miles was talking about, and perhaps just clarify one thing, because I've had many discussions with Devon about this. The essence of Devon's problem in his company is this, and it's something that we all face in the industry. There are not enough journey persons, I should say, anymore in the industry. They're retiring. They're not being replaced at a 1-to-1 rate. But because of the ratios that are mandated by the Rhode Island legislature, that don't have to be what they are, but the legislature has enforced the union ratios so that you end up having, for the first, let's say, I'll pick an example, first labor, you only have to have one journeyman to have one apprentice, but then you have to have 2 or 3 additional journeymen to have one additional apprentice. That is a lopsided ratio system that just doesn't work in the industry anymore, because we have too many retiring journeymen and you can't meet the ratios. So that's what Devon was saying, because we've had this conversation. There just aren't enough journeymen for him to hire to meet the ratios so that he can hire enough apprentices. That's what needs to be addressed if we're ever going to solve the apprenticeship problem. And for all those reasons, ABC Rhode Island is in opposition to this bill.
Thank you very much.
And I thank you. Yeah. You're very welcome.
Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. We are moving right along to House Bill 6010 by Representative Casey. So you know, Representative Casey, you was right there at the microphone at your seat. You could have been, you just wanted everybody to see that you're hooked up tonight, don't you? You're looking sharp, so you wanted it to be seen by everybody. I got you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Williams. Okay, so you've exposed my vanity. Thank you. I'd like to speak to you tonight on House Bill 6010. This has to do with post-traumatic stress disorder for first responders. Most of you here, my colleagues, you all know me as Representative Casey from Woonsocket. For those of you that are unaware, I'm a professional firefighter for the Woonsocket Fire Department, and I have 14 years of experience on the job. My brothers and sisters and I proudly serve the city of Woonsocket. We take our job very seriously. But tonight I'm not only representing them and our brothers on the police department, I'm also representing all the first responders in the state of Rhode Island and, dare I say, the entire country. Today's a great day to wear the uniform because 97% of the time that I wear this, I'm attending a funeral or burying a brother or sister or a retiree. So I'm happy to be here in uniform to discuss this very important issue. I'm going to briefly read a synopsis of this legislation to let you know what it does. I will get into some technical language and I will share a few stories with you. This act would extend injured on-duty benefits to police officers and firefighters that suffer from a diagnosed post-traumatic stress injury, except under certain conditions. This act would also provide that the municipal police officers and firefighters that are unable to perform their duties by reason of post-traumatic stress injury would be entitled to receive an accidental disability retirement allowance as well as IOD, which is injury on duty benefits. The specifics of the legislation, for those of you who have a copy of it, on page 2 of the bill, line 11, section 2. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to read it so it's clear for our witnesses as well. Post-traumatic stress disorder, as described in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, current edition, published by the American Psychiatric Association, related to the exposure of potentially traumatic events resulting from a police officer or a firefighter acting within the course of their employment or from rendering of emergency assistance in the state of Rhode Island at any occurrence involving the protection or rescue of a human life while off duty, as set forth in subsection H of this section, and diagnosed with post-traumatic stress injury by a licensed mental health professional. This licensed mental health professional must have a master's degree or higher and shall be deemed to have, will be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress injury by a licensed mental health professional with a master's degree or higher, shall be deemed to have sustained an injury in the line of duty as the term is used in subsection A. The benefits provided for under this section shall not be extended, these are the exclusions, shall not be extended to a police officer or a firefighter if their post-traumatic stress injury diagnosis arises out of any disciplinary action, work evaluation, job transfer, layoff, demotion, termination, or similar adverse job actions. So I want to be clear with this legislation before we hear from our witnesses. This is not a bill that's intended to allow a first responder to claim a post-traumatic stress injury and retire on disability. The purpose of this bill is to allow a first responder to seek mental help and get themselves straight and in the right line of mental health in order to go back to work and continue to do their job. I'd like to show, and I believe it's going to be put up on the screen for you, some nationwide statistics on firefighter deaths. And if you look in the year 2020, line of duty deaths on the job throughout the United States were 96, and suicides among firefighters alone, this does not include police or other first responders, were 120. So it's clear to me that there are some issues that we need to deal with. Now, last year, the governor came out and said, it's cool not to be cool. It's okay to seek mental health help, okay? We're trying to encourage people, especially with the pandemic. Everybody has suffered some sort of stress just being cooped up alone in their house. The things that I'm going to talk about are on-the-job stresses. And if you could just bear with me for a moment, because some of the things that I'm going to describe might be graphic, and I've actually toned them down a little bit. Picture yourself responding to a rescue call and finding an 18-year-old girl hung by her belt from her closet bar. Her knees are still bent and her feet are on the floor, and then assisting the police officers to release her from her constraints. Investigating a fire alarm in an apartment complex, finding an elderly man who lived there, decomposing, his remains liquefying into the couch. Performing CPR on a 6-year-old child in his kitchen with his mother and his 2 siblings witnessing the event. These aren't stories from around the kitchen table at the firehouse. They're not from a book of first responder stories. These are in my head. These are my experiences. That's only a few of them. We all deal with these experiences in different ways. There are some people that will say, well, you signed up for the job. And they're right, we did. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us when we experience these things. We're all tough on the outside. All my brothers and sisters are alpha males. We're supposed to be able to handle things, or that's what we feel like. At times we feel we're invincible. We do things that normal people don't do. It is part of our job, but like I said, it affects us all in different ways. The final experience I want to share with you is the last one. June 22nd, 2019. My colleagues here at the House will remember that. If you were here, it was our last day of budget session. Saturday, a beautiful afternoon. I was on shift at the fire department. I had to have a brother of mine cover for my shift so I could be here to approve the final budget. I got a call from my friend who was covering me. I was expecting him to tell me, bring something back to the station, maybe some ice cream, something we could enjoy. And he told me that my own brother, my friend, had taken his own life. It's not something that everybody has to deal with. I'm not saying that my struggle or your struggle or anyone else's struggle is more difficult than anyone else. We're all different. What I'm trying to stress to you is that it's important for all of us to be able to vent our frustrations and our problems, and we need to be able to seek mental health without injury, and to be able to go back on the job and do our jobs the best that we can so we don't suffer the same fate as our brothers. I will entertain questions from the committee if wanted, and I will do that from my seat when I return. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Chairman Casey. I don't know if it's so much as a question, but I do want to just commend you for sharing your stories today. It's incredibly moving, and I also want to commend you for introducing this legislation, because mental health is health care. And I am so glad to see over the past several years that we're really starting to have these conversations about how important it is for people to get access to mental health care. And whatever we can do to remove those stigmas to help people get the help that they need, and as soon as possible, is crucial. I just want to thank you again for the work that you do as a firefighter, for the work that your brothers do. You guys keep us all safe. You are the people literally running into the buildings when we're all running out. And I just can't thank you enough for your work, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your stories today. So thank you again.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Rep. Casey.
Thank you.
We have some people waiting to testify. Do you have Paul Valletta? Hello, Paul?
Yes.
Hi, it's Rep. Messier.
Hi, Rep.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
You're here to testify on Bill 6010. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rep. Madam Chairwoman, hosts, labor members, just as a side note quickly, I'd like to tell you that the American Recovery Rescue Act was passed today by the House of Representatives. It was passed on March 6th, and that provides $80 million to state and local governments and other entities for training to address suicide, burnout, and behavioral health conditions, substance abuse for public safety officers and healthcare professionals. Just shows in a federal bill like this, where $80 million is put aside for mental health of safety officials, that this is a problem that unfortunately we're facing nationwide. Myself and the chairman of the State Firefighters Members Assistance Program have submitted written testimony. We also left with the clerk numerous studies written on this subject of firefighters and PTSD. Because of our written testimonies and the great job my brother from Woonsocket did, my testimony will be brief on an extremely sensitive yet extremely important subject and a tremendously important piece of legislation. Our Rhode Island Firefighters Members Assistance Program is second to none. We also have a statewide critical incident stress team at our disposal. And this suicide phenomenon among firefighters has been going on for many years, as you saw the chart and the numbers that Rep. Casey showed, that suicide is now taken over for line of duty deaths. And who has the answer to this? If we had the answer, we'd solve it tomorrow. But we've got a tremendous program in place to get to our members early. But we got hit with this phenomenon. We had 4 suicides in a little over 2 years, the last 2 years. So we're before you now, and the first time we introduced this bill was last year. We've never introduced a bill like this. It was the first time last year when we had 3, and unfortunately, between the bill being introduced last year and this year, we had another. So we're at 4. So why are we before you with this bill? Quite frankly, we need help. We're asking for your help. Usually we're the ones that are asked when we have to help people, but we need your help. We need you to partner with us because maybe this is the next piece of this puzzle. As Rep. Kazarian said, the stigma of mental health, not just for firefighters, but for everybody. We've seen it, and there's always been that stigma attached to mental health, and it truly is an illness. And we need your help. We need you to partner with us. We need to pass this law. Maybe this law is the next step to getting our members from coming to us early, and that's what we're looking for in this legislation. We want our members to come to us early so they never get to the point that our four brothers got to. That's why we're asking you to do this. This has hit us hard in the last 2 years. You know, we're not. This isn't supposed to affect us, but it is, and it has. We need you to be with us. We need you to partner with us to pass this legislation. We need you to become the 24th state to pass firefighter legislation, PTSD language, and in our humble opinion, there's going to be no or little cost to the state, our cities or towns, or our fire districts associated with this legislation. So that's why we're before you. We'd love this bill to get passed. Maybe that's the next piece, that if there's a state law that draws that nexus to firefighting and PTSD, maybe we get to people earlier. It's just a hope. That's what it is. It's a hope. We're gonna try anything to solve this, and 23 other states have this legislation. And I just want to bring something up, something this legislation doesn't do, which is very important. This does not create an automatic PTSD injured on duty status for a member. A quick example: if a firefighter has a bad run, and this run is staying with him or her for a couple of weeks, and he finally comes to us and says, "Hey, listen, I think I got to go talk to someone." That still doesn't kick this legislation in. That firefighter would have to go to a mental health professional, and he may be or she may be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress over this one incident, and it may not kick in the 6 criteria. It's a very high threshold to be diagnosed with PTSD, and they may not kick in those 6 criteria to be diagnosed with PTSD. So that firefighter may be just diagnosed with stress, and this legislation wouldn't kick in. So for the naysayers out there, this isn't about getting another presumptive illness. This isn't about people going on pension. This is trying to help us save lives. Thank you for listening to me, and we appreciate your consideration of this bill. I'll answer any questions, and I also do have our Members Assistance Program chairman for the firefighters. He's at our disposal if anybody has any technical questions. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul Valletta? Okay. Oh, I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Folks.
Representative Alzate.
Hi. So just to add to a point that Mr. Valletta was stating, at my time at the Providence Center, we did see a lot of clients who would claim that they have PTSD, and we would try to treat them as best as we could. It's not something that is easy to diagnose, but it is certainly something that is easy to pick up if if the clinician is trained well, to know that the person is I don't want to say faking it, but for lack of a better word, faking it. So to his point of saying that if we pass this legislation, it seems to be like easy, I understand what he means by that. It's, the clinicians are very well trained to really understand and pick up the signs of somebody who has real PTSD. And, it is something that we need to talk about. It's something that I hope that, if this legislation were to pass, it's definitely something that I hope that we can continue to talk about and push forward. And I'm extremely proud of my colleagues who are firefighters in the House who are speaking in favor of this. They know the importance of it, and just continue to push forward, continue to bring this to light, so that you can help the rest of your colleagues, because this is great and very important legislation.
Thank you, Rep. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to our next caller. Is Tony Capezza, International Brotherhood. He's in support of the bill. Tony, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Good evening.
You can go ahead.
I am Rep. Messier. Good evening, Rep. Messier and the honorable members of the House Committee. My name is Tony Capezza of the International Brotherhood of Police Officers. I would like to first start off by thanking Rep. Casey for sponsoring this legislation. I'd also like to commend him on his compelling presentation of the bill. I come before you tonight on behalf of the 28 police departments that IBPO represents in the state of Rhode Island in support of 6010, which is a joint police and fire post-traumatic stress bill. Over the years, PTSD has become a major concern for police unions, who have seen firsthand how it can affect our members. There are several factors that cause stress in police work. Among the most stressful experience police are exposed to in their line of work are exposure to traumatic events, for example, violence, seeing many dead bodies, domestic violence, sexual assaults, and probably what bothers police officers the most, abused children and child pornography. Studies have shown that police officers exposed to traumatic incidents have been found to have higher levels of depression and anxiety. Studies have also shown that police officers, on average, experience over 3 traumatic events for every 6 months of service. Post-traumatic stress in the police field can come from a single incident or from what is known as cumulative PTSD. Cumulative PTSD is the most overlooked type of stress. It is subtle in the build-up and is easily ignored by the responder and their department until it is too late. It is not like a catastrophic event, such as a police officer involved in shootings, where the department has people in place for treatment. The effects of cumulative PTSD take a backseat and are rarely recognized and addressed. Cumulative trauma extends beyond shootings and other critical incidents. Some examples of cumulative trauma are the days and nights of being cursed at and shouted at, listening to the screams of people in distress, viewing dead bodies, and the daily anxiety and fears that go along with law enforcement. Remember, we normally have contact with people when they're at their worst. A good way to explain cumulative stress would be to use an example of a balloon. If you put a little air into it every day, it would eventually become full and pop at some point. The same happens with stress. A good example in an area where we have noticed increased incidents of PTSD are officers who work in the Internet Crimes Against Children unit. They spend a great deal of time viewing videos that predators are sending to our children, as well as every aspect of sex crimes against children over the Internet. I don't have to explain how this can affect even the toughest cop and take its toll over time. As stated earlier by Rep. Casey, the unfortunate part is that many officers who are suffering from stress and trauma fail to seek help. Many cannot bring themselves to talk about what might be perceived as weakness in the eyes of their coworkers. Many still believe that when they put on the badge and they are perceived as being a superhero to the public, which relies on them to do things and get things, relies on things get to be at their worst. We have to remember that police are human beings, and although they may put up a good front, there are always incidents that bother them. Many times when officers are experiencing PTSD, the unthinkable happens. In 2019, which is the last year I was able to obtain police figures for, it happened 228 times. 228 police officers committed suicide, a figure that is higher than the number of police officers killed in the line of duty, which was 135. These incidents are definitely all job related, and when an officer is out of work due to PTSD, after it's been confirmed, their job status should be reflected for what it is, an on-the-duty injury. I thank you for your time, and I ask you to support 6010, and I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions from the committee? No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rep.
We have one more caller, Hannah Stern from the ACLU of Rhode Island, taking no position. Hannah?
Hello.
Hi, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for your time this evening. I know it's been a long night, and I appreciate you all being here. My name is Hannah Stern. I'm testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island. We do not have a position on this legislation in concept, but I do want to express concerns just about its scope in one very specific aspect. So, police accountability has really never been more important, especially with the perspective of the past year and the nationwide Black Lives Matter demonstrations. However, we're concerned that this bill could allow for police officers who have engaged in misconduct against a civilian, but who do not receive formal discipline for those actions, the ability to receive benefits stemming from that misconduct by reporting that the incident has led the officer to suffer from PTSD. So we really mention this concern particularly because it's not hypothetical. I included two examples in our written testimony, but I'll just briefly describe one in particular, which involves an Arizona police officer in 2019 who had fatally shot an unarmed man. The civilian who was killed had been caught on video pleading with the officer not to shoot him. The officer was then acquitted and temporarily rehired by his department so that he could apply for a disability pension based on the PTSD that he alleged he suffered after shooting the individual. So we think it's really critical that if this bill is to be favorably considered, language should be included which addresses these types of scenarios. We recognize that the bill does bar such benefits for, quote, adverse job actions, but we would just encourage that the language be made clearer to apply to the types of misconduct that I referred to earlier. So thank you very much for your time and your consideration. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Any questions for Hannah? No, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
There are no other witnesses at this time. Thank you.
Next, we're moving right on to Representative Felix's Bill 6012. Representative Felix, are you on?
I am, Madam Chair. How are you this evening?
A bit freezing and tired, if you really want to know.
Oh,
Please
no.
proceed.
Well, I'll make my comments really short so that you all can go home and get some rest.
Thank you, love. Thank you. Please proceed.
So I want to thank you for having me. Thank you. I want to thank you all for having me this evening on testifying on this important bill. Like I said, I'll keep my comments brief so that you can all go home soon. All working people should be able to support themselves and their families. Yet tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders are unable to do so, making sub-minimum wages. Tip workers are forced to rely on the generosity of strangers in order to earn what is guaranteed by law to many workers, and this is fundamentally unfair. With this pandemic, tip workers are being hit even harder. We've all seen online or even in person angry customers who are asked to put their masks on by employees, the same customers who these employees rely on for their livelihood. The system of tipping is not only inequitable, but has its origins on slavery. Following emancipation, white restaurant owners sought to hire black workers without paying them, forcing them to live exclusively off of tips. This was made into law, in 1938 when the United States enacted its first federal minimum wage law, yet continued to exempt restaurant workers, allowing them to be paid mostly in tips. It's inequitable given that the industry is comprised mostly of women and disproportionately women of color, who more often than not, you'll see tip workers are twice as likely to live in poverty and rely on food stamps than the general workforce, suffer from twice the rate of sexual harassment, receive no sick time, and have no opportunity for upper mobility. And these statistics are even worse for workers of color who experience poverty at more than twice the rate as white restaurant workers. Yet on the other hand, the restaurant industry is one of the largest and fastest growing industries. Federal law requires restaurant owners to make up the difference when tips fall short. Yet the Department of Labor has found that nearly 84% of restaurants investigated have violated these laws. And you'll hear how raising the minimum wage for tip workers will ruin businesses, etc. What you will not hear is how the 7 states that require a full minimum wage in addition to tips, those states have higher restaurant industry sales, small business growth, and job growth, and the same and higher rates as tipping as the 43 states with sub-minimum wages for tip workers. In closing, increasing the tip minimum wage will disproportionately help women and workers of color and help decrease wage disparities in Rhode Island. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Hearing none, thank you, Representative. Moving right on to the call list. Isaiah Kelly. Isaiah?
Hello.
Please turn down your television, radio, computer. We're having a little kind of difficulties.
Oh, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
All right. Hello, Chairman Williams and members of the House Committee on Labor. I'm Isaiah Kelly, and I'm going to be testifying in support of Bill 6012, which would increase the tip minimum wage from $3.89 to $4.95 over the course of the next 5 years and 9 months. Over the last 7 years, I've worked in the service industry. I've done everything from driving to cooking, serving, hosting, busing, expediting, bartending, and shift managing. I've observed a lot of the ways in which power imbalances in the workplace have led to negative outcomes for tipped employees. And as a tipped employee, the first barrier to a living wage is actually the irregularity of customer business from day to day. So there are cases in which you may work anywhere from 6 to 8 hour shifts and have no customers show up, depending on the day of the week and the time scheduled. In the industry, generally, managers make schedules, so it benefits you immensely to be in management's good graces, and it's economically problematic for you to dissent or assert yourself. So when I've witnessed cases of harassment in the workplace and talked to my fellow employees about it, they usually express something like, "It is what it is." I think that's because they feel unable to defend themselves because they risk financial fallout with management. And even further, I've had it made clear to me that they prefer not to be defended by anybody else because they're concerned about losing the few lucrative shifts that are available in the industry. I'd like to also stress that the pandemic has only worsened those exact imbalances. Weekday shifts are slower than ever as people are rightly staying home when they can. However, people still do want to go out, so they save their going out time for weekend nights. And that usually means that the only time as a tipped employee you're going to make above a minimum wage, which is about $4 an hour or $32 for 8 hour shifts, is going to be on the weekends. And so, following from my last point, it makes individual incentives much higher to avoid conflict with management who might perversely schedule you if you're like a troublesome employee. The other side of harassment in the industry is from customers, which is going to be your second barrier to a living wage. Not only have to work at the right times, which means avoiding any potential conflicts with management, but you also have to ensure customer experiences are positive enough that they're willing to give you the 18 to 20% that would allow you to cover your living expenses. There's no reprisal for not tipping. It's actually just true that people have economic incentive not to tip. So when you're faced with the decision to address inappropriate comments made by a customer or to let things slide, a decision to defend your own dignity or align yourself with your economic interest, tipped employees are frequently going to choose the latter. Conflict with customers also leads to negative economic outcomes in the short term, obviously because they won't tip you. But you also earn your reputation as a troublemaker, which creates conflict with management, which then once again leads to fewer lucrative shifts. And like it's not theoretical. I've seen that occur in the industry. So I think we're all aware of the ways in which power imbalances in the workplace can lead to negative outcomes, such as unnecessary levels of stress, unfair working hours, incompensation, and harassment. And like it's been mentioned a few times, this industry is well documented. More sexual harassment claims are filed than any other. And I do believe that a major reason for this fact are the various power discrepancies caused by the incentive structure of tipped employment, in which it's necessary to appease management and customers. Bringing back to the COVID pandemic, again, this pandemic has disproportionately affected tips workers throughout the crisis, just because, once again, while the food service industry relies on us as workers, it doesn't give us any additional pay that corresponds to our being essential. We still rely on customer tips for income, but we're at higher risk of tracking COVID-19 if we do receive those tips. You also have to put up with rude and unsafe customers who disregard COVID regulations, which means when a customer won't keep their distance or wear a mask, you're forced to choose between your health and the health of your loved ones or their wages, which is just, to me, unacceptable. I also do want you to understand that I'm testifying from a position of privilege. So tonight I'm sure you'll hear plenty of testimony from business owners and lobbyists on the same issue. For them, testifying is very easy. My name and the names of any would-be testifiers is going to be attached to our testimonies and available for public record. So while business owners don't need to fear reprisal, we employees have good reason to. I'm lucky enough to have a college degree and opportunity outside of food service that makes me comfortable enough, although of course not perfectly so, to attach a name so that my voice can be heard. I've also worked hard to find a few restaurants which align themselves with their employees' interests, and again, it is few and far between that do so. And they do work hard to make sure that harassment and other forms of degradation are kept to a minimum. I think a lot of people who face economic instability and uncertainty more than I do are not going to have the opportunity to make their voice heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the witness? Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
I would like to reiterate the request. Now, I sympathize, I understand, I feel the pain, and it's extremely great to see that participation in testimony in the General Assembly has increased by 99.9%. But please understand that participation also needs understanding of the purpose that you are coming before us. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you are for the bill, if we have a list of individuals testifying that's for the bill, it would be helpful if you add to the previous that was not mentioned, to the previous individual testifying. Because what we are hearing is repetition of what has been previously said. In addition to that, you have submitted written testimony, and then with that, we're taking it and reading it, and then you're calling in, and we're repeating it all over again. So consideration is what I'm asking, consistency is what I'm asking, and please stick to the merit of the bill itself. So everyone that I'm going to call on this list is in support of the legislation. So the next person I call, the next people I'll call, I hope that you have not only heard listened to me, but heard what I have said, and I'm asking that respectfully. Next person is Alan Kingsley, who also submitted written testimony. Mr. Kingsley, you're on.
Hello, hi. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the House Labor Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony today. My name is Alan Krinsky, and I'm a senior policy analyst with the Economic Progress Institute. The Economic Progress Institute supports House Bill 6012, Representative Felix's proposal to phase out completely the separate tipped minimum wage in Rhode Island. And we also support the earlier minimum wage bill with bills 5938 and 5939. I've submitted written testimony for those. On the tipped minimum wage, you can see more in my full written testimony, but I want to make 2 points this evening that I don't think have been made yet. First, I think many or most of the members of the committee and the people tuning into the hearing grew up in a society where tipping and a separate tipped minimum wage seem normal, and we take this for granted. Yet this situation, both historically and across the world, is actually a rather unusual system with a specific history, as we've heard, rooted in the post-slavery era. And so we shouldn't assume that this system of a tipped minimum wage is normal or even necessary. Most of the world functions without it, and indeed much of the service industry in the United States functions on a regular wage system without tips. Second, I want to address the economic issues. There are three kinds of states: those that use the federal tipped minimum of $2.13 per hour, those like Rhode Island that use a higher tipped minimum, and 8 or so equal treatment states that do not distinguish. They have no separate tipped minimum wage. And in the equal treatment states, the poverty rates are lower for tipped workers, especially those in the restaurant sector, as Figure 1 in my written testimony demonstrates. And furthermore, as Figure 2 shows, compared with states allowing a lower tipped minimum wage, equal treatment states have shown greater growth in both employment and the number of establishments. And I want to share with you one really amazing study by researchers who examined 23 years of data from 1990 to 2013, data from the quarterly census of employment and wages. And what they did is they focused on the full-service restaurant industry, and they took the really, clever step of comparing counties that were neighboring counties but across state lines. So they compared 280 sets of counties on different sides of a state line, and where there were different wage rates, regular or tipped minimum wage rates. And they found, investigating those comparisons, that increases in the tipped minimum wage increased earnings, while there were, quote, small, statistically insignificant employment effects, end quote. If there was a major loss of employment attributable to differences in the tipped minimum in neighboring counties across state lines, this study would have detected that, and it did not. So phasing out the tipped minimum wage is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reduce significantly the sexual and other harassment we've heard about this evening, and an opportunity to reduce poverty among those workers as well. I urge you to send this bill to the full House for consideration. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? There aren't any, but I do have to say, Mr. Krinsky, while I appreciate your testimony, I did ask, you even acknowledged that you submitted written testimony and you went through almost the entire package that you provided us. So again, I thank you for your passion and your support for all these the employees that need someone like yourself and many others of us to support them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would reiterate again, please, everybody that's going to be called upon is for the bill. Jessica Kent.
Ms. Kent? Hello, Chairwoman Williams and members of the House Committee on Labor. My name is Jessica Kent. I am from North Smithfield, Rhode Island, and I'm speaking to you today as a former tipped worker and in solidarity with current tipped wage workers across the state. In the summer of 2019, I worked as a beverage cart driver at a country club in southern Rhode Island. When I applied for the job, I was told it would be $6 an hour plus tips, and that the tips would be more than enough to make up for the low hourly wage. The country club was exclusive, and we catered to very wealthy members, so I was sold on the idea of earning a lot of money in tips. However, I was lied to. It turns out I was actually making $3.89 an hour, our state's current tipped minimum wage. The tips were also not as great as I was told they were going to be. The most I ever made in one day was about $67. As if the low-paying wage and poor tips weren't degrading enough, something that isn't talked about enough is sexual harassment that many tipped workers endure in the service industry. On my first day on the job, one of the members sexually assaulted me. He called me over for a drink and proceeded to tip me by sticking a $5 bill down my shirt, into my bra, and purposely touched my bare nipple. Just thinking about it makes me cringe, as I can only hope it causes the same reaction in you.
Please, Ms. Kent, please, with all due respect, could you stick right to the bill? The graphic stuff at this time of the evening is not well received. Thank you so much, and proceed.
A big part of my statement plays in part to the treatment that service workers get and how I feel that tends to the wage and how we are paid. So
no, I understand. I understand. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a large percentage of more participation, and that is welcome and appreciated. But if you are going to participate, it is good to also understand the process. And the process is, if you are going to testify, to utilize the diligence and the respect to those who are listening to you, as passionate as you are presenting it, but to keep directly to the content and the intent of the bill. And I understand there's a lot more that goes on with regards to stuffing something down your bra and all that good stuff, but we need to be specific to the content of the bill. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sure. So as these things are just connected, so obviously with these working environments, it was hard for me to feel comfortable or to make a lot of money in tips, as I relied greatly on tips from men who were disrespectful and don't respect people who work tipped wage jobs in the state of Rhode Island. Most of my statement was pertaining around the treatment of service workers and how sexual harassment is a big part of that and how that plays into part of the wage that they receive. So I suppose that I will then just conclude my statement. Nobody deserves this low of wage. Nobody deserves the harassment that they get working these low-wage jobs. So that's why I'm speaking out now in hopes that you'll support Bill 6012 and raise the minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Ms. Kent. Have a good evening. Would like the record to reflect that Tyler Next on line is Estefania Clavijo. Please proceed.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Chairwoman Williams. Thank you for your time. My name is Estefania Clavijo. I am a resident of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, current social work graduate student at Rhode Island College, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 6012 to raise the minimum wage for tipped workers. I worked in the restaurant industry from the time that I was 18 to 22 years old. I started as a hostess and shortly after moved to takeout. I then started to train as a server and worked as a server for about 3 years. At the time, I was working full-time and also going to college full-time. On a typical week, I would have class Monday to Friday and would work Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, and double shifts on Saturdays and Sundays. I was brutally exhausted at the end of every week. Looking back, I still don't know how I got through it, except that I knew I needed to work in order to afford going to college. When I began going to school, I had zero financial support from my family and was only able to go to school and cover my own living expenses by working full-time. Even after working full-time, there were moments when I was so broke that the thought of dropping out would cross my mind. This wasn't because I wanted to leave school, but because I could barely afford to pay for it all while also paying for my own expenses. Working in the restaurant industry meant dealing with certain normal working conditions that weren't actually normal, like I was made to believe. For example, the restaurant I worked at would close at 11 p.m. on weekdays and 12 a.m. on weekends. Those of us who worked the closing shift would need to stay another 1 to 2 hours to close once that last customer left. Although it was never explicitly said to us, we knew that staying on the clock to be paid was not the best idea because it would interfere with the hours where we could take tables and make actual money. As a result, many of us clocked out as soon as the last customer left, and at 20 years old, I didn't think this was a big deal, especially because all of the other servers who had been there for much longer were doing it. I figured that this was normal. This was my first real job, so I did not know what to expect. Looking back now, I know that no one should be doing any additional labor off the clock, yet somehow this was the norm. The tips at the restaurant I worked at were not great. The amount of money I walked away with was never enough considering the number of hours that I worked. Other speakers tonight might say that the tips are excellent and raising the minimum wage will only deter people from tipping. But how do you deter someone from tipping who wasn't going to tip anyways? Having worked in this industry, I've realized that those who want to tip generously do, and those who don't want to won't. But my livelihood should not depend on someone's generosity. There is a stark difference between working at a restaurant on Federal Hill and working at the restaurant I worked at. I felt like I couldn't say no to people or else it would impact how they would tip me. I feel like I didn't have any boundaries at work, and it's an experience I would never want to have again, especially during this pandemic. I remember getting a hard time from customers simply for carding them for alcohol. People would get upset, but it was part of my job to ask them. Our managers always expected us to let the customers be right, and in a way, that left us vulnerable. Now in the pandemic, we've added another layer of responsibility to servers who remain underpaid, undervalued, and who are expected to enforce mask-wearing policies and social distancing guidelines. I have great sympathy and admiration for the servers who are persevering throughout all of this, and I do not envy them one bit. They deserve better, and we can thank them by guaranteeing them a stable living wage. Additionally, one of the managers I worked with made very inappropriate comments to me or my coworkers on more than one occasion. This manager once asked me if I was legally able to vote in this country, implying that I did not have the legal status to do so. He called another coworker of mine fat when she was 8 months pregnant. On more than one occasion, he would tell me I needed to smile because I looked miserable. This is the kind of harassment servers put up with, not just from customers, but from management as well, for just $3.89 an hour. I would never want anyone to go through any of these experiences. I didn't learn anything from them, and they did not strengthen my character. If anything, it showed me the ugly side of the service industry, and all the while, I was barely making ends meet. I do believe that by raising the minimum wage for tipped workers, we'd be in a less vulnerable position. The livelihood of tipped workers should not depend on whether someone tips well or not. That is unacceptable, and I implore you to vote yes on Bill 6012 because all workers deserve to make a living wage. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on 6012. And for the record, Kelly Nevins from the Women's Fund for it, Jordan Goyette for it, Bethany Souza Foster for it, Hannah Mackey for it, Zach Mareza for it, Melissa Gonzalez for it, Bridget Canahan for it, Alan Krinsky for it, Matthew Tavey for it, Tanya Harris for it, Christopher Colozzi against it, and Georgia Hollister Isman for it. That concludes it this evening. We're going back for a moment so that we can have Ms. Leanne Burns from the General Treasurer's Office to testify on 6010, Representative Casey's bill. Proceed, Leanne.
Thank you, Chair Williams and committee members. This is Leanne Byrne, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Office of the General Treasurer. I thank you for calling me back to comment on 6010 on IOD and disability pensions. I apologize for whatever technical difficulty had me missing earlier, but I wanted to say that as a social worker, I really appreciated the conversation I heard earlier on the importance of addressing mental health treatment and reducing stigma. But it's our office's policy to oppose any legislation related to the pension system without the benefit of an actuarial analysis, which is required by state law. Such an analysis can be requested by the chair of the House Finance Committee at the request of the Speaker of the House. I know earlier speakers have said that there was a low cost to the state, but until such an analysis is conducted, we can't know what the financial impact is of this legislation on the pension system. And this is necessary to ensure the sustainability of the system to provide retirement security and disability pensions to public safety officers, as well as teachers, state municipal employees, and other public servants who rely on it. In the meantime, we're always available to discuss legislation related to the employee retirement system with members of the committee or any stakeholders. Thank you for your time, and thanks again for making sure I was heard tonight.
Thank you, Leanne. We're moving right along to Representative Henry's Bill 6089. Representative Henry's.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. I will try and keep my commentary brief, but as you know, Madam Chair, it's important to get the facts right, so bear with me as I read along my testimony here. So as we sit here this evening, thousands of Amazon workers are striking for better conditions in Alabama, and they face an uphill battle as an anti-union sentiment is at an all-time high across America. The dignity of a well-paying, protected union job has been chipped away all across the country, and Rhode Island is no exception. With this legislation, House Bill 6089, it will provide a necessary protection for workers who are currently left unprotected by both Rhode Island's and the federal government's labor laws. I am fully aware that most protections given to labor organizations are in the NLRA, which is a federal act. The NLRA protections supersede state law and include almost all types of private employment. However, states make their own provisions in areas not regulated by the NLRA, such as rights of public employees and private employees who do not engage in interstate commerce. This bill will ban employers from permanently replacing a striking employee. It is necessary that we not only protect the right to strike, but also the right to strike with job security. Under our current laws, employees who strike for better wages and working conditions are at risk of being permanently replaced by workers that their employers hired during their strike. This serves as a fear tactic to prevent employees from engaging in union strikes. Overall, this has made collective bargaining nearly impossible and has resulted in a completely unbalanced employer-employee relationship. It's vital that we protect these state employees and private employees who do not engage in interstate commerce and who are offered no protection under federal law as it stands. There is just a loophole currently that in practice allows an employer to replace their striking employees permanently even after employees have ended their strike. The main differences with the current law as it stands in chapters or section 2810.11 and 2810.9 is that this also offers in addition to protect workers who choose to join secondary strikes. Secondary strikes play an essential role in ensuring a competitive labor market. No employee who joins in solidarity with fellow workers to fight for better working conditions within their industry should face the threat of replacement by their employer. Rhode Island is the 5th most unionized state in America, a statistic we should be very proud of. And we must pass this legislation to protect our workers' right to strike with job security. It will only strengthen the already standing laws. And I don't assume to know the experience of the union workers, but those who are on the line to testify will assure you of their need.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Representative Henry? Hearing none, we'll move right along to Benjamin Branchard. Mr. Branchard.
Yes. Hi, Chairwoman Williams. How you doing?
Good, and yourself. Please proceed.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Williams and committee members for your time tonight, and thank you for Rep. Henry's for introducing the bill. My name is Ben Branchard. I represent Carpenters Union Local 330 here in Rhode Island. I'm calling tonight to voice our support for House Bills 5722, 5723, 5938, 5939, 6011, 6012, and 6089. specifically tonight, I just want to comment briefly on House Bill 6089, which would prohibit an employer from permanently replacing an employee during a strike. We view this bill as closing a loophole in current labor law, whereas under current law, workers who strike for contract or economic reasons cannot be fired and must be given reinstatement rights. But employers can get around this by permanently replacing employees. And I realize you can't see my air quotes, but we've seen this happen in Rhode Island many times, and we believe that workers who take protected actions to better their economic situations should be actually protected as the law intends. So we're advocating passage of this bill in full. Again, I'm also here in support of several other bills which are heard before on the agenda, and if you'd like me to read the list of bill numbers again, I'd be happy to do so.
It's recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
For the record, Jordan Goyette from Warwick is for the bill. Christopher Carlozzi from NFIB is opposing the bill, and that concludes the hearing on 6089. Moving right along to Bill 6091 by Representative Morgan. Representative Morgan.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chairman and the committee. My bill does a simple thing. It allows the Department of Labor and Training to give training on contract negotiations to local municipal town councilmen or school committee people. A lot of time, these folks, they stand up to help our communities, help our schools, help our town run, but they have no idea what they're getting into when it comes to contract negotiations. So this is just to help them be better prepared, right, to understand all the facets of contract negotiations, but also I hope that the training would include how to project how the different parts of a contract will affect the municipality's finances long term. So a lot of things can be packed into this that will make our communities financially strong. I have to mention that the state actually, I know when we had a lot of the hearings, I guess it was 3 years ago when we were doing the community service grants, we were giving the unions, the state was giving the unions over $1 million a year to do the same kind of training with union officials. And now they still give them $191,444 a year through URI to do the same thing. So just in fairness, I think that we should better prepare the people who step up to help our municipalities be well governed.
Is that your testimony?
That's it. That's the end of it.
Okay. Are there any questions? Thank you, Representative Morgan. We don't have anyone signed up to testify. However, we do have Frank Flynn, President of the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health, who opposes this bill, and Matt Weldon from Department of Labor and Training that opposes this bill. Is there anything else you would like to add to it, Representative Morgan?
Yeah, I actually did call Labor and Training this afternoon, and the reason they were opposing it was because in their current setup, they're not enabled to do this kind of training. And I made the case, obviously, that this bill would, if it became law, would put this into their wheelhouse. It would enable them to do this training. And that was their objection. They said, well, we're not allowed to do this training. Well, this bill would allow them to do this training. In fact, it would instruct them to do it.
So why don't you get a written letter from them specifically stating what they believe or know that they can or cannot do with regards to the emphasis of what your intent is, and that may, so that we can have it on the record.
Okay, I will. Actually, I had spoken with them and we were going to follow up tomorrow.
Okay. Any questions? I thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on 6091, and at this time, it gives me pleasure to ask for a motion for adjournment. Everybody is waving and made the motion and seconding it. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.